We didn't just fly all the way across the world to America for this World Cup. We came here with one very specific mission burning steadily in the back of every single one of our minds long before we even boarded the plane. And that mission was simple on the surface, but meant everything underneath it. To stand behind, to support, and to genuinely celebrate the smallest nation to ever qualify for this tournament in the entire recorded history of the competition, Curaçao. And today, after weeks upon weeks of build-up, after all the endless talk in group chats, after all the planning around flights and tickets and logistics, after all the anticipation that had been slowly, steadily building inside every one of us like pressure under a lid, that mission was finally, actually coming to life right in front of our eyes. It didn't feel real yet. Not fully. Not until we were actually walking those final stretches toward the stadium itself. The energy in the group started building long before we even got close enough to see the stadium gates properly, the walk itself slowly turning into an impromptu quiz show that nobody had planned, but everyone somehow ended up participating in. Football trivia getting thrown back and forth between us like it was some kind of unofficial competition that nobody had actually agreed to, but everyone quietly wanted to win anyway. Someone in the group tried naming a Curaçao player completely off the top of their head, said it with total confidence, like they knew exactly what they were talking about, and then got it completely, spectacularly wrong, and the whole group erupted into laughter that genuinely lasted a good few minutes straight, nobody willing to let it go easily, the gentle mockery continuing on and off in waves for the rest of that walk, resurfacing every few minutes, whenever the conversation lulled even slightly. Then somebody else in the group dropped what honestly felt like a genuinely brutal quiz question right into the middle of all that ongoing chaos, asking out loud, almost as a challenge, what European passport every single person actually born in Curaçao automatically carries from the moment of their birth. And watching the scramble to figure that one out among everyone walking together was genuinely pure entertainment in itself. Guesses flying left and right in every possible direction, some completely random shots in the dark, some half-informed based on vague memories of geography lessons from years ago, until eventually somebody finally landed on the correct answer, the Netherlands, and received a small mocking round of applause for actually knowing something useful for once during this entire walk. That wasn't even close to being the end of it though, because right after that particular question got settled, the population question came up next, and that one somehow caused even more confusion and passionate debate than the first question had, numbers being thrown out into the group that were wildly, almost comically off in every possible direction, ranging from estimates that were far too low to estimates that were strangely, wildly too high, until eventually somebody in the group managed to land somewhere reasonably close to the actual real figure, somewhere around 156,000 people total living across the entire country. And that specific moment, that exact instant, is when it actually hit all of us properly for the first time, the sheer weight of the realization slowly sinking in that 3% of that entire nation's total population had made the long, expensive journey all the way to be inside this one specific stadium today, specifically to watch this exact match unfold in person. 3% of an entire country's population. Sit with that number for just a second longer, because honestly none of us could quite fully process the scale of it in the moment either, standing there trying to do the mental math and failing, and it sparked an immediate wave of promises rippling quickly across the whole group, people swearing up and down, hand on heart, that if Curaçao actually managed to find the back of the net at any single point today, even just once, they were going to completely and utterly lose it, full-blown floor celebrations, getting down on all fours right there in the stands regardless of who was watching, zero dignity remaining afterward, absolutely no shame whatsoever about how they'd react in that moment of pure joy. The banter didn't stop there either, because right as we kept walking closer and closer toward the entrance, the trophy conversation kicked into gear next among us, with somebody confidently and rather loudly declaring to the whole group that the actual official World Cup trophy is called the Jules Rimet, stating it like it was an established, undisputed fact. Only to get instantly and rather mercilessly corrected on the spot by someone else standing right there in the group, because that particular name actually belongs to the original trophy design from several decades ago, a completely different trophy from the one currently being competed for in this exact tournament today. That correction alone earned another solid, extended round of laughter at the expense of whoever had gotten it wrong, the joke resurfacing again a few more times throughout the walk as a running gag between everyone. But honestly, out of everything that happened during those pre-match moments leading up to entering the stadium, nothing quite compared to the actual physical feeling of seeing that enormous blue wave of supporters gradually build up steadily all around us as we got closer and closer toward our actual seats. Wall-to-wall Curaçao supporters stretching out in every single direction imaginable, further and wider than any single one of us had genuinely expected walking in that morning with our tickets in hand. The atmosphere alone felt electric in a way that's genuinely hard to properly capture in words even now looking back on it, with somebody in our group swearing out loud, completely seriously, that they could physically feel some kind of magic hanging thick in the air around us, half convinced, half joking, that we were actually about to witness the single biggest upset in the entire recorded history of the World Cup as a competition. On top of all that steadily building atmosphere around us, the heat outside that day was absolutely relentless, a brutal, sweltering kind of heat that made every single one of us instantly and sympathetically aware of anyone in the group who happened to be overdressed for the occasion, and one particular person got roasted mercilessly by the rest of us for showing up in 3 full layers of clothing in weather that intense, visibly sweating buckets before the match had even officially kicked off yet, the jokes about his outfit choice continuing on and off for a solid chunk of the pre-match period. In between all the ongoing heat complaints and the endless back and forth football talk, an impromptu grip strength battle broke out between a few of us purely out of boredom while we waited around for kickoff, and it turned out there was a genuinely surprising amount of raw physical strength hiding within different members of this particular group that absolutely nobody had properly accounted for or expected beforehand, leading to a fair amount of good-natured Then, right on cue, as it always does eventually, hunger hit hard across the entire group, and the conversation shifted almost instantly and completely toward stadium food options, kicking off with a full-blown, surprisingly passionate debate about corn dogs versus standard regular hot dogs, a debate that genuinely got heated for a food-related topic, with strong opinions being defended on both sides before eventually ending in a fairly unanimous and fairly brutal final verdict from the group as a whole: corn dogs, as an entire category of food, simply are not it, and honestly never really were to begin with. That whole extended food conversation spiraled quickly from there into an actual dare being issued to one unlucky member of the group, someone getting voluntold, whether they actually wanted the responsibility or not, to go and hunt down the single most outrageous, most questionable food item the stadium had available anywhere across its entire menu selection. And what eventually came back from that particular mission absolutely delivered on every single bit of that promise, and then some. It was a genuinely monstrous creation combining mac and cheese, beans, and potato salad, all 3 violently crammed together into one single unsuspecting sandwich, something that visually looked like an absolute disaster sitting there on a plate before anyone had even worked up the courage to take a proper bite out of it, the group standing around it in a rough circle, just staring at it for a solid minute, half laughing, half genuinely concerned about what they'd just created. The verdict, once it actually got eaten, shocked pretty much everyone standing there watching closely, because somehow, against every single visual instinct screaming otherwise, it actually tasted considerably better than it had any right to whatsoever, a fact that seemed to genuinely surprise even the person who had ordered it in the first place. It later came out through some further digging and questioning that this particular creation wasn't even an official menu item at the stadium at all. Someone had simply walked up to the counter and convinced a vendor behind it to smash every single available side dish together into one deeply unfortunate-looking bun. Purely because they'd asked nicely, and the vendor had apparently decided to indulge the strange request without much resistance. By the time we finally made our way toward our actual assigned seats inside the stadium itself, the score predictions floating around the group were flying wildly in every direction, ranging anywhere from a confident and somewhat pessimistic 4-0 scoreline in favor of Germany, all the way to wildly optimistic, almost fantasy-level double-digit scorelines in favor of Curaçao that nobody actually believed but everyone enjoyed saying out loud anyway, with someone eventually settling on a far more cautious, scrappy 0-0 prediction that would only realistically break open somewhere around the 20-minute mark of the actual match itself. And then, completely out of nowhere, without a single bit of warning, the rain came down hard and fast across the entire stadium, and the whole section around us instantly exploded into noise and excitement in response, with somebody immediately screaming out over the sudden downpour that this was clearly the sign we'd all been unconsciously waiting for this entire time. The blue wave of supporters officially transforming right in front of us into what genuinely felt like an actual blue tsunami rolling steadily through every single row of the stands surrounding us, umbrellas and ponchos popping up everywhere, but nobody's energy dropping even slightly because of it. Kickoff finally arrived after what had genuinely felt like hours upon hours of build-up and anticipation, and the countdown detonated instantly into a wall of pure, deafening noise the very second it hit zero, the entire stadium seemingly holding its collective breath for one final second before releasing all of it at once in a roar that seemed to shake the stands themselves. Curaçao came out of the gates looking genuinely solid defensively in those crucial opening minutes of the match, holding their defensive shape admirably and impressively against wave after wave of relentless German attacking pressure that kept coming at them, before eventually, as most realistic predictions had suggested beforehand, the floodgates opened up properly and the goals started stacking up fairly quickly against the underdogs. The entire stadium around us dipped noticeably into a heavier, far more tense atmosphere as goal after goal went in against the smaller nation, the mood shifting visibly row by row, until, against every single realistic odd stacked heavily against them from the very start, Curaçao finally, gloriously found the back of the net themselves for the very first time in the match. And this wasn't just any ordinary goal either. This was genuine history being made right there in front of our own eyes. The country's very first ever World Cup goal in its entire footballing history as a nation, and the whole stadium around us completely and utterly lost its collective mind in celebration. Complete strangers hugging other complete strangers, drinks flying up into the air without a second thought, the overall noise levels somehow spiking even higher than they'd been during any of Germany's earlier goals combined. Somebody in our group instantly declared, without a single moment of hesitation, practically shouting it over the noise around us, that they would remember that particular scorer's name forever for the rest of their entire life, purely and simply for putting Curaçao onto the World Cup scoresheet for the very first time in the nation's entire history as a football-playing country. Halftime eventually arrived with the overall scoreline already sitting well out of reach for any realistic kind of comeback attempt, but honestly, by that specific point in the match, nobody around us in the stands actually seemed to care about the raw numbers on the scoreboard anymore. Pure unfiltered pride had completely and totally taken over the entire section surrounding us by that stage. People were still buzzing, still talking about that one goal, replaying it from memory, describing it to each other even though everyone had already seen it happen live with their own eyes just minutes earlier. The second half of the match only ended up stretching that overall goal difference even wider as Germany kept up their relentless attacking pressure consistently throughout, wave after wave of dangerous attacks testing the smaller nation's defense repeatedly, but every single time Curaçao somehow managed to find even the smallest flicker of a genuine attacking chance of their own. That same blue wave in the stands erupted all over again with full force and volume. Almost as if the actual scoreline currently sitting up on the board meant absolutely nothing at all to the traveling supporters gathered around us that day. Every near miss got celebrated like a goal. Every decent tackle got cheered like a save. The connection between this crowd and this team had gone far beyond simple results at that point. When the final whistle eventually blew, with the score settled firmly at 7-1 in Germany's clear favor by the end of 90 minutes, there was genuinely zero visible anger anywhere near us in the stands. Not a single complaint, not a single frustrated word. Just pure, completely unfiltered pride radiating outward from everyone around us in every direction. A small traveling nation's fans celebrating their first ever World Cup goal. Like it was some kind of trophy entirely of its own making, completely separate from the actual result of the match itself. And by the very end of it all, as people slowly started gathering their things and heading gradually toward the exits, everyone around us seemed to genuinely and quietly agree on one simple, shared feeling, scoreline completely aside. This had been a day that absolutely none of us were ever going to forget for the rest of our lives. A memory that would outlast the actual final score by decades. Walking back out through the stadium gates afterward, the heat from earlier in the day had finally broken thanks to that sudden rainstorm, leaving behind a strange, almost peaceful calm across the crowd exiting around us. People still smiling, still talking animatedly about that one moment, that one goal, that one piece of history they'd all witnessed together in person. Nobody was talking about the 7 goals conceded. Everybody was talking about the 1 goal scored. And in a strange, quiet way, that told you everything you needed to know about why any of us had actually made this entire trip in the first place.